Welcome to the Outer Realms with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. So thank you so much, Folgers. It just wouldn't be the same without you. Literally, thank you. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, an award-winning composer of Halloween horror and sci-fi, dark wave electronic music. He is the voice, and that is his music that you hear on that intro. So we're so grateful for him. Check him out on any platform that you like to listen to great music on. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of our banners and logos here at the Outer Realm. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He's got amazing pieces and does a lot of commission stuff. You're also looking at someone who does a lot of horror themed things. So check him out for sure if that is your thing, and it is ours. So amazing stuff. So tonight, for the very first time, we welcome Rebecca Pittman, who's going to be discussing her book, The History and Haunting of Salem, The Witch Trials and Beyond. So, yes. So this one I kept, in mind, back in my mind was for Amelia, who's been and who's checked it out and thinking, oh, yeah, we definitely have to do. I know. Hey,
well, Massachusetts is my favorite state. I'm not going to lie. Even though I live in Canada, I could live in Boston very easily.
Yeah.
I love Boston, so I'm very excited. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think it'll be really awesome. I mean, we've had people on before who've talked about, folklore and stuff in Salem. I love hearing about different areas throughout the world that are just, full on crazy, haunted, and amazing folklore. And Salem is one that people tend to be really curious about. And she's written a lot of amazing stuff. Let me just grab her list.
The entire east coast of the U.S. is haunted.
Oh, yeah.
That whole upper northeast coast. I don't know about Florida or anything, but yeah.
She's written, let's see, The History and Haunting of the Stanley Hotel, The History and Haunting of the Myrtles Plantation, The History and Haunting of the Lemp Mansion. Wow, she just went totally over the pond for that. History and Haunting of Lizzie Borden, and The History and Haunting of the Palace of Versailles. That's one I would definitely love to hear about, because that's pretty fascinating.
Versailles is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
There's a place I'd love to walk through.
Oh, yes. So she is a best-selling author of several genres, her popular history and haunting series of books. I guess I've been in the spotlight of various TV, radio, and podcast forums. Former TV talk show host, muralist, escape room owner. Ha! You gotta like her. She owns an escape room.
It'd be interesting to ask her if she designed it.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Interesting, because I always like to speak to the designers of those rooms. I find them fascinating because that's not easy.
What's going through your mind when that's happening? But she's a theme creator, runway model who finds mysteries irresistible. I love it. That is fascinating. Just fascinating. I love it already. So, oh God, everybody's coming in. Greetings. Hello, Ruth.
Hello. Good evening. Hi,
hey.
Sarah and Michael. I feel like I'm in Romper Room.
Romper room. Escape room, romper room.
No, romper room. I see Michael and Tamara.
Oh my God.
I'm aging myself. Mind you, that show was on before I was born. Just saying.
Yeah.
The repeats. It was the repeats that I got to see. I wasn't born when that show came out, but I loved that. And I was born a year after Sesame Street came on.
Yeah, we're gonna go down that road. I don't want to talk about it.
Sesame Street, I think it's
No.
phenomenal that they have adjusted and are still out there.
Right.
Why don't they
I
do a
know.
paranormal show for Halloween?
It's pretty wild when you think about it. If I try not to think about it.
Big Bird the Ghoul.
I know. We're all just waiting for our lovely guest to pop in. Just if you're all wondering why we're just biding some time, that's why. But yeah. So I don't know. I've just
It's Thursday.
I know.
It's
I know.
Friday
It's been a
Eve
day.
is what
It's
I
been a
like to
day.
call it. Friday Eve.
Hmm?
I said it's Friday Eve. I prefer to call it Friday Eve.
Friday Eve is nice. TGIF
Even though we
Eve.
still work on Fridays.
I know. Well, for sure. It's not like we just get to not.
No.
I wish, because Joe, our producer, is away. So it's like, okay, he's got to take care of.
Oh,
Okay,
Michelle's
I'm going to take care of
double
all the
duty
kids.
right
I'm
now.
here.
Yeah, you're double duty
Including
right now.
myself as a big kid. I know. So
Yeah.
he's off at the Writers and Illustrators of the Future Podcast Awards show. And I think we're going to be airing that tomorrow night for those who might be interested and curious about what this big awards ceremony is like. But in the meantime, what I forgot, Amelia and I in the Outer Realm have been nominated for the third year in a row for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. Best female, is it the best female host, I believe, is the category. So right here, I'm going to put that right up. Oh, there we go. Cash your vote. So over the next few weeks, you're going to be seeing a lot of commercials and ads being created because we're not the only ones. No. That are nominated. I'm sure there's usually a few other people who are nominated as well. So we're going to hear all about that as well. Mm-hmm. And yes, more great news. Preston Dennett, Dolly Safran, woohoo! Sunday night, new show starting here on United Public Radio. So
that's
be
exciting.
Sure to check it out. Yours truly is going to be on it. Yes.
That is so exciting. Sunday night. What time, Michelle?
8 until 10 Central. 8 until 10 Eastern, which is 7 until 9 p.m. Central. So check it out. Brand new show. And of course, cool. Preston, everybody loves Preston Dennett and everybody loves Dolly. So it'll be great. Why do I always want to break out in song when I see Dolly?
Hello, Dolly. Yes, I always want to sing.
I'm still with the stupid Bernie song in my head because you posted that nonsense.
The minute.
Okay. No, Banana Splits is worse. Okay. Our guest is here. She's going to save me.
Yes, that is Jack Kenna's fault.
Please save me.
Hi, Rebecca.
I know. We're going to get into show tunes next. I know
it's not my fault. We were left unsupervised.
Don't rain on my parade.
Oh,
there we go. I have a fellow.
Okay, I'm going to drop
awesome.
Hello.
And we're going to go into Meet Me in St. Louis next.
Oh, I've been there.
Oh no. I'm outnumbered. My sister used to do that to me, show tune after show tune. I'd be just like, put the wine away. You have to put the wine away.
Well, my brother-in-law is a theater actor, so I had to go to all those shows.
Hey, I love show tunes.
Yeah.
Do.
I didn't mind ABBA's concert.
In your head. You get that earworm and you can't get it out. So
yeah. I have to say the most exciting show for me, other than him doing Donny Osmond, because I got to meet him like a bunch of times, but was Mamma Mia, because it's just the ABBA album. You'll understand. Michelle, no, because she doesn't listen to that.
I've seen it. I used to have theater memberships. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that is an incredible experience because the audience gives so much energy back to the actors. So for me, I think that was the most incredible.
Right.
What's
show.
Weird is they even do it in the movie theater. They get up and dance in the aisles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of movie theaters. I hate
Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's what I like seeing in movie theaters. Everybody throwing food around.
I think there's certain films that require that IMAX thing, but then there's certain films that require quiet, and people don't stay that way in the theater.
Wow.
So
I'm a big theater fan. I'm really hoping they don't go away.
The
Yeah,
movies
Yeah,
for
you
film.
can't beat the popcorn anyway.
I know,
it's
I know.
true.
The experience is great. I like big epic films in theater. You know, if you're going, I think if I ever watched Star Wars for the first time, I would want to see it on a big screen.
Right.
Titanic was epic for me. Those kind of things, you know, certain things. I have an issue with people eating while I'm watching something. It's that noise. I'm just one of those people. But I used to go all the time, and I'm hoping, like you, they don't take it away. I think it would be really sad if everything is always at home. You change the lifestyle. But speaking of
Well,
changing, yeah,
we're losing so many things. We're lucky to still have a drive-in theater here.
Wow.
we have one too. I have one nearby.
But when I saw Jurassic Park and came out of the theater into the parking lot, I was literally looking around. So you're right. There are some things that you need to have it on the big screen.
Yeah, because the music, the effects, that, you know, when the CGIs are on the screen and you get that background, that's all part of that surround, is all part of the experience. It's
Yes.
important. It is. It is.
It is.
I like going during the day.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, they got rid of all the matinees since everything happened a couple years ago. So, but anyways, there were no movies in Salem at the time.
My son just drugged me to see Renfield.
Oh, how was that?
I tell you what, that is the bloodiest movie I have ever seen.
I don't
The
even know what
body
it is.
count rivaled Hannibal Lecter. It
Really?
was arms ripped off, entrails, blood, and I'm looking over at my son like, seriously? He went, sorry, Mom.
Wow, I never would have thought that it would be something like that. I thought it would have just
I've never
been
seen anything
much
that
better
bloody.
done.
What
Did
film was
that.
that?
Wow, Renfield.
Bad.
What's Renfield?
Renfield, you know, Renfield is Dracula's like assistant. Which
Oh,
is kind of, you know,
Yeah,
crazy
it's
Renfield.
Nicolas
It's like
Cage's
I
new
didn't know.
movie.
crazy
Yeah.
Renfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. That
Anyway.
is a shame. Thank you for that, because I will not. I don't need to see that. I
It
was hoping they would have
more
been much
like
more
for a
creative
teen
with-
slasher movie. I think a younger crowd would have gone, "Oh, cool," but
Oh, like a Friday the 13th kind of. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, that's too bad, because
is
they
too
missed the
bad.
opportunity to go back historically. That's really sad.
well, the popcorn was good.
It
it's
always
always
is.
about the popcorn. Let's just
Yes.
say that.
You always get the really big one so you can refill it for free and keep eating.
Especially if you sit by my son. Yes.
Yes. If you sit by me, you'd be refilling your big too, because I eat a lot of popcorn.
Well,
Love it.
on another note.
Yes. No popcorn in
Welcome
Salem.
to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Outer Realm. We've really been looking forward to this, because when I saw your profile come up, I went, "Oh, excellent, Salem." We have a lot of people who ask about Salem. A lot of people seem to be
Yeah.
very intrigued about it. Amelia's been, so I thought, "Oh, this is perfect. This is
My favorite
awesome."
state, Massachusetts. So anywhere you go in Massachusetts, it's haunted.
You know what? I totally believe that because one
Yes.
of my other books was on Lizzie Borden. So
I've been there too.
I've been over in Massachusetts a lot between writing about Salem and writing about Lizzie. It is. It's a very interesting state. A lot of haunted, weird stuff going on there.
Yeah. Did you make it to the Naval Museum?
I did not. I
Oh,
went
you
whale
have to go back
watching.
there. Yes. And
I
you
see
write a
another
book.
Right,
There's-
but
It actually happens while you're just standing there. For me, it did.
wow.
I didn't get to go in. I just saw it from a distance because I was on my way to the Borden house and I was just killing some time. And I thought, oh, let's drive over here and, check this out since we have 25 minutes to kill. You don't want to sit in front of the Borden house for half an hour. So we went there and from the shore, I caught EVPs. I was shocked.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
on the Taunton River right before you get to Lizzie's house.
Yes,
I meant to go there and I didn't.
you
So I
have to
will
go
next
back. I
trip.
will meet you there.
Okay. You have to get Dunkin' Donuts though if you're in Massachusetts. They're
Not
on the
coffee.
corner.
Not the coffee.
The coffee.
The coffee, not the coffee.
Not the coffee.
Yeah. The milk is
Um,
different in Massachusetts. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, actually that fits in because Lizzie Borden's milk was poisoned. But we are on a different story tonight. So we'll let that one go.
Yay.
Oh, Rebecca,
Have to
you
have
will
you back.
find that we will go anywhere you want to take it. I always
It's your
say,
show.
Yeah, when a guest comes on, it's your show and it's wherever you want to go. You'll find we're very, very um it's just like, hanging with friends and just talking about anything.
Cool.
And I want to always stress when I start the show, you get to do most of the talking.
Oh.
So I know, I can't wait, right? So I know millions of people are watching you, it's no problem. So for real. So
Say hi.
yeah. No,
My
exactly.
mother
So
ran a modeling agency, and I've been on a runway since I was 5.
me too.
And I
I hear
really
you.
appreciated the confidence that it gave me.
Mhm.
Starting out, 5,000 people in the audience and all of that, and doing commercials and everything. I like being in front of a camera. I'm one of those weirdos.
Right, right. You know what? I don't like the camera. It amazes me that there's not a lot of family photos of me. And when there was, I'm
nor
like
I.
this. Making me take a stupid picture. Yet I did model also.
That's probably why you didn't want to be in family
I ended
photos,
up in
though.
television for 20 years, and yet
Yeah.
I cannot stand having a picture taken. So it's funny you say that. No, I love it. It was just good. It's
But
like,
she always takes photos with the fans. She doesn't say no.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, she doesn't say no.
well,
It's one
sometimes you
thing
have
to
no
not want
choice
it, but
because
you
you
do
turn
it for
around,
the
there's a whole
fans.
family behind you going. It's
Yeah.
like,
So you just do it. You just do it, even though you hate it. Yeah.
Well, with my mom, we couldn't just take a normal photograph. I'm sorry, my bangs are driving me crazy.
That's okay. Mine too. You look great.
Oh, thank you. If we took any picture, it was Rebecca, pivot to the, turn your hips to the right. Okay, turn your head. Oh,
assume the position, Rebecca. I
Yeah.
know.
That was back in the day when everybody posed for photos. Now it's all about just getting that moment rather than, the obscure moment where the person doesn't even realize they're being photographed, which is so much more natural and beautiful. But yeah,
Sure.
we grew up in
Unless
the
you're
time
the
where we
person who
posed
says, I
like
didn't authorize
statues.
that.
Yeah.
So what I mean, obviously I was going to say, what are your humble beginnings, as I like to state, with you got yourself into, obviously preferences, you have a haunted series from all these different places. Did it start off with certain experiences? Like, did you have a lot of experiences as a child?
Yes, my mother has some psychic abilities, or did. She passed away in 2008, but the one that really made an impact on me, because I was only 7 and my sister was 6. We were driving in California to go to my uncle's house, my mom's brother, when she just suddenly swerved off the road. I thought she'd hit something and started crying. And I said, Mom, what is it? And she goes, my mother just died. And my grandmother lived in a whole nother state. This was before cell phones or anything else. And I'm like, what? And we drove the other 5 minutes to my uncle's house. He came out of the door and said, Sis, Mom just died. So it was my first inkling that there's so much more out there. And she could meet our friends or somebody for the first time and tell them what their room looked like, what their grades were, all of this stuff. And I was so jealous that I didn't have that.
Wow.
Don't be jealous.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
every time I've gone to one of these haunted locations, something happens to me. So I've had people say, maybe you don't call it psychic, but I've been told I'm an empath, and I'm so sentimental that maybe the ghosts just gravitate toward me because I'm going, come sit by me and tell me what happened to you. So I don't know if that's what it is, but I do have an awful lot of things happen around me.
Right. And I guess you just decided the empath in you just wanted to know all these stories. And what was the first, I mean, we're talking about Salem tonight, but I'd like to backtrack a bit. What was your first real investigation? Where did you figure would be a perfect place to start for your series?
Well, I lived only 35 minutes from the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. I live in Colorado. And I was up there twice a month just because it's so gorgeous. And I couldn't get over that nobody had written a comprehensive book about it.
Wow.
So you not only have the Stanley steamer history, in fact, there's one sitting in the lobby, you have Stephen King's huge impact on it when he stayed there, and it inspired him to write The Shining. So I asked the owner, can I write about this? And he said, yep. And so while I was doing that, someone said, have you heard of the Myrtle's Plantation? And then it was Lemp Mansion, and then Lizzie, and then Salem, and then the Palace of Versailles. And it just kind of went from there. I didn't start out doing this.
Right.
But boy, it hooks you, doesn't it? Once you've had something happen to you, you cannot go back
No,
to who you were.
no, I agree with you. I think it's such a profound experience, especially when it's your first experience. When like I always stay in haunted locations. I prefer, no matter where I travel in the world, it will be a very old location and it will be a haunted location. Because for me, I just love it. I love that feeling of, the excitement of what kind of experience you're going to have if you're fortunate enough to have one. It's just, why stay in a regular place where there's just so much excitement coming at you that you can't see? I don't know. But
well,
you
put it well when you said a privilege. I see it that way every time. I look at it as a gift that they are letting me know that they're there. That it's always scary to get poked by something you can't see or watch an object move, but it's still, I consider it a gift because it's something not everyone experiences. And yeah, there were times I really wish I hadn't, but it's an amazing thing. And again, once that door's open, that's it. You're open to all possibilities. At least I am.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same. So what did you have any experiences up at the hotel when you were, I mean, obviously you would have stayed there to try to get, write the history and sort of get a feel for the place. It's supposed to be like extremely active. So did you have any experiences?
I did. I'm also an artist, so I did faux painting and murals for 40 years. I've painted over 4,000 murals.
Wow. You're definitely gifted, Rebecca.
Oh, you're so kind.
No, you are. You wouldn't be able to paint like that if you weren't. You're channeling.
People flew me around. I had work in Robert Redford's office and John Denver's home, so I felt incredibly blessed.
Oh, amazing.
But so when I approached the owner of the hotel and he knew I did faux painting, he goes, I'll make you a deal. You can do the book. You can stay there, room and board, all taken care of. If you'll touch up the lobby where when Stephen King filmed his miniseries, the TV show. Now the movie Stanley Kubrick's was not shot at the hotel. It was shot in Oregon. But so Stephen King, when he got all his clout, said, I'm doing a TV show about it. It's going to be my way, and it's going to be at the Stanley. So Hollywood came in and painted the walls to look darker. They call it faux bois, which is fake wood. They wanted it to look like mahogany and have a darker feel because it was all white embossed wallpaper. And they said, here's the deal to the owner. If you'll let us do that, we'll put it back to normal when the movie, popularity dies down. Right. Still hasn't. So wow. I had to faux paint the entire lobby where luggage carts had dinged it because wherever they hit that painted wood, you could see white plaster.
Yeah.
So I was there a week and stayed in the Manor House, which is the building right next door. Come to find out, I was the only person in the Manor House. There's no staff. There's nothing. I would leave the hotel at night and walk the short sidewalk and look up at that building and all the windows are dark. And I'm going, oh.
Yeah, it's chilling.
I had my watch stop at 1:15 in the morning. It was just a wind-up Timex. It wasn't digital. And yet, even though it returned to the correct time during the day, when I woke up in the morning, it had stopped again at 1:15. And something blew tobacco smoke in 7 of our faces. We were walking down the corridor. We were actually doing a paranormal overnight investigation. Had something burn my arm. I had a 4-inch welt where it felt like an ice cube had been pushed into my bare arm. There is a lot of activity there.
Wow. And what was the significance of the watch stopping at that time specifically?
Well, you're going to love this. The owner of the gift shop there, Sarah Walker, and I became very close. And I came down, I would get in my paint clothes and come down and paint during the day and then interview staff and customers, you know, on the off hours. And so I said, Sarah, this is the weirdest thing. This is now the third morning that this watch has stopped at 1:15. I said, I don't get it. And she went, let's Google it. I said, we're going to Google 1:15. So she Googled it, and the first several things that came up, I think it was James in the Bible, and it was a chapter and verse that said, be not afraid of the shifting shadows.
Ooh,
And I'm
that's pretty
staying
deep.
alone in the manor house, and she goes, I think it's your mom, because my mother had just passed away.
Oh,
And I started crying over that, but she said, I said, well, it could be January 15th, maybe somebody died in the room. You know, it could be, but I got to admit that Bible verse was pretty right on. It was very nervous to sleep in that whole building by myself every night.
oh my gosh, absolutely. You
Yeah,
know,
I'd be
some
petrified.
Well, they
Yeah.
put me in room 1301, which is right next door to the most haunted room in the manor house, which is
because they don't
1302.
get through walls,
That
right?
didn't help me.
You could have been in any room in that manner. You would have thought you would
Yeah.
have had experiences.
And it started snowing. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is getting too Stephen King here.
I was
And
gonna say.
the elves are bugling outside, and yet idiot me, I went to bed watching Ghost Lab.
Oh,
So
where's Johnny?
here's Johnny.
Yeah, that would have been a little bit much. so, so basically, you decided you were going to tackle Massachusetts, Salem. So where do you want to start with that? There's so much history. Did you go with the intention of saying I'm going to write about the witch trials, or did you just start off with just, you know, the generic popular hauntings? Did you find a few hauntings of your own?
Well, actually, my books are 3/4 history about the place or the event or the person. And then the last quarter of it is paranormal activity that goes
Right.
on there today.
Right.
So the witch trials fascinate everybody. And I spent a long time researching those. I read all the original trial transcripts. I want the books to come to life for people.
Right.
And then by the time you get to the haunted portion, you're familiar with the people that are haunting it.
Right.
If you didn't have the history beforehand, it doesn't do you a lot of good. So I went there to research it. I did stay in the John Proctor house. John Proctor and Elizabeth Proctor were arrested for witchcraft. John was hung. He's the one that the Crucible is about. He's the main character that Arthur Miller wrote. So he's probably the most famous of those that were hung. But the owner let me stay several nights in the house. And you're going to love this part. She was already there with a friend of hers when I got there. And they said, we're going to let you have this room because you're really tall. And it's got the best bed. I said, are you kidding? Because it was a really nice room.
There we go.
And yeah, that's the John Proctor house. A red door means hospitality. And they had red doors a lot at taverns. And John Proctor did have a tavern on the main floor of the house. So I said, well, thanks, you guys. Well, that night I'm asleep and I hear, and it woke me up, and I'm trying to figure out the sound when all of a sudden a lamp on this really old dresser that someone had pushed around the corner of the room turned on. And I'm going, okay, it's an old house. So I got up, but when I went over, I noticed it looked like it had moved. So I put it back where it belonged. I turned it off. I got back in bed. About 5 minutes later, it turned on and went and moved itself along this dresser.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm now going, I do not think this is a coincidence. And I went over again and turned it off. And before I could get back to the bed, it did it again. It turned on and started to move. So I unplugged it. And I said, enough is enough. And the next morning when I told Barbara and her friend, they burst out laughing. I said, you put me in that room because you knew it was haunted, huh? And they went, well, yeah, we're not going to stay in there.
That's nice. Take one
It's
for
'cause
the
you were
team,
tall.
Rebecca. Yeah,
But
take
here's
one
the
for the
great
team.
news for your listeners. Coming this fall, the Proctor House, I believe, is going to be where you can stay overnight. You can rent a room there.
There we
And you
go.
can go to theproctorhouse.com and get information there. But this is a first. It's never been open to the public like that.
No.
Wow, that'll be a treat. I have to put this up because this is for you. Roger Garza has a show. Here we go. He's got a show here on the network, and it is called, just to be sure, Latino Psychic Visions. So he picks up on things just by looking at a picture. So I'm putting it up there, Roger, just so you know, I'm putting it up there. So this is for you.
I am hearing someone
Named Bree.
Bree. Interesting.
Okay, there it is.
Thank you, Roger. I really don't know a Bree, but it might come out.
There we go. He'll keep going if he's still tapped in. So so the Proctor House is going to be open. That's I mean, I'd love to do that. I'd love to stay there. Bubbles, we're staying at the Proctor House. But then again,
What?
Bubbles likes the 5-star
No.
hotels. So
I like to stay at 5-star hotels. I like to
Yes.
visit the other places, but I like to be
I
a
love the old
princess when I'm
places.
away. Yeah, I'll meet you there.
Tell them to put a mint on the pillow for you.
Yeah, they put several chocolates when you stay at the Kimpton.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Right.
Oh gosh.
Saying Brianna, is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
I don't know a Brianna.
Sorry, Roger. Keep going.
I'm past childbearing years, so I won't be naming any kid that. But I just,
Sorry.
I'm not making fun of you, Roger. I'll see if something comes up with that. That's very interesting. I believe in remote viewing, and so I'm open.
Oh, you never know. It could be a past life thing too. I've had past life people come through readings for me, and I always feel terrible because I don't know. I don't know who they are. You're in the chat room, Margaret.
chat room,
I promise. Yeah. And I always say I'm sorry. I don't know, and I feel really like terrible about it. But if they're not in your immediate soul circle from this life, I'm just like, you know. So okay, so we stayed, at this magnificent place, and you went from there. So you had all of these experiences. So we'll continue on from there.
Well, I had basically already finished the book, but I was back out there to do book signings and some things like that. So the thing that fascinates me about Salem, and I think most people, is just the audacity of it, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
In that era, in 1692, when it broke out, the young children were literally considered below the servants sometimes, or just above the servants sometimes.
Wow.
They were to be, seen and not heard. All day long, it was nothing but chores and drudgery, because back then you had to make everything. I mean, all the meals, the fireplaces are huge. The one in the John Proctor house, there's several, and they're gigantic. But so it was a life of drudgery. And with the Puritan religion, they had a lot of, I don't want to call it archaic, but I don't know what else to call it. For instance, if you did something wrong, they'd put you in the stockades out in the middle of town where everybody could see you. That's where you had your head and arms through the holes.
Right.
Adulterers were branded and sometimes paraded through the streets naked. So for a civilization that was supposed to be, they left England because they did not agree with the church anymore. They wanted something a little more pure, something of their own. And yet dancing and singing was frowned upon normally. And the girls, all of them that were involved, were between the ages of 9. I think the oldest girl was 25. So this is a time when your hormones are raging and you're, wanting to push away from authority, but they couldn't. And it was very contained. So when the witch trials broke out, it was in winter. It was in January, which is even worse. There's that cabin fever. You can't even get out and do anything. It's just all chores. If you talked back, you were called a child of Satan. Reverend Paris, where the witch trials broke out, was actually the reverend for the church in the town. You went to church on Sunday 3 hours in the morning, got lunch, and came back for another 3 to 4 hours. And most of it was hell and damnation preached from the pulpit. They absolutely believed the devil was real. And they had just come from England, where they'd witnessed hundreds of witches being burned. So witches to them were very, very real, as was the devil. Now you throw in the fact that there are Indian raids still going on. And many of these girls who became, witnesses, they would call it crying out against somebody if they thought they were a witch. They had witnessed their families butchered. One saw her little brother cut to pieces, and they were left orphaned, some of them. And so all they could do was come to Salem Village and clean someone else's house to have a roof over their head. So they felt like a servant.
They were
And
horrific.
a lot of them were dealing with hysteria just over everything they'd seen. So you have a lot of things coming into this. It's the perfect storm.
One of the accused was expecting, and
Yes.
they wouldn't hang a pregnant woman. So
Correct.
her husband was hung, but he's not the witch. So how did you solve that?
He was accused of witchcraft as well.
Yes, but I'm saying, like, she was the one who was accused. I was told when I was there at the memorial that he took her place.
No.
Oh,
They
wow.
were both accused. They were both put in jail.
I didn't know that.
You're right. They could not hang her because it would be killing an unborn baby that was pure. And that got her out of being hung, but they hung him. There were a few men that were brought in as witches or warlocks or wizards or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. Whoever had the bigger house and the available space. It's awful to see it like that, but it's true. So tell us what happened next.
Well, so here's how it started. Betty Paris, who was Reverend Paris's little girl, she's 9. If you've ever been around a child that's just very high strung and nervous, that was Betty. Plus, you're being told every day Satan's out there. You're worried about Indian raids. So they had a slave that Paris had brought back with him, and her name was Tituba. And she had, she would tell them stories, and she practically raised Betty and her cousin Abigail Williams, who was 11, who was living there as well, because Elizabeth Proctor, their mother, was sick a lot. She was bedridden a lot. And that you're seeing there is the actual photograph of Reverend Paris. It's very old. But so anyway, Tituba, she was from Bermuda or the Honduras, I've forgotten which. And they believe she knew magic, and they were bored out of their mind. It's winter. There's nothing to do. So one day, the 2 little girls come to her, and they had brought over some friends who sneaked in and said, do some magic for us. Show us who our future husband's going to be. Because back then, that was your only hope of getting out, was to marry well. And so it was called the Venus glass. And basically, it was just a glass that you would drop egg whites into and give it a little stir. And each girl got a turn. And if the egg white supposedly took a shape of something that would tell you what your future husband was. So if it looked like an apron, he was going to be a butcher. If it looked like a sickle, he was going to have farmland. Well, when she dropped the egg white in and stirred it, according to what everyone said happened, it took the shape of a coffin. And little Betty, the high-strung one, went nuts because she knew this was black magic, that they weren't supposed to be dabbling in it, and she thought that meant the devil was coming for them. And she freaked out. When Reverend Paris comes home, she's just sitting under the furniture. She's shaking. She's running around. She's just going. He goes, what is the matter with this kid? And finally, she goes into a trance. And she's just laying in her bed, staring at the wall, unblinking for several days. Well, she's getting a lot of attention. I mean, so Abigail, who's a little more streetwise, her cousin, who's 11, is thinking, well, this is getting her out of doing chores. She's getting attention that we never get. So Abigail starts acting up. She starts running around the room barking like a dog. She'd flap her arms like this and go whoosh, whoosh, like she's flying. One time she almost ran into the fire that was lit. And so now word's getting out. Dr. Griggs was called to come over, and he looked at both girls. He goes, there's nothing wrong with them. This is not of, medical. This is something, so the evil hands has been placed upon them. And that's how it started. The other teenage girls, Mary Walcott was first. She lived through the field, came over, witnessed what was going on. She started having symptoms. And before you knew it, there were all these teenage girls that were starting to just twitch and go into these routines. And here's the turning point. Up until then, the adults had been saying, what afflicts thee? And one day they look at Betty and say, who afflicts thee? Because Dr. Griggs had said that it was the evil hand. That photo is so rare. That is the only one we have of Reverend Paris's house during the witch trials.
So I take it doesn't exist at all.
The foundation is there, and you can go down into the foundation, which is kind of strange and cool. But so when they said, who afflicts thee, Betty, who loved Tituba, threw her arms out and went, Tituba, like, help me. And they went, Tituba? Tituba's a witch? And so Tituba was the first one hauled in. And so they took her to Ingersoll's Tavern, which was just right around the corner from the Paris home, and started questioning her. Are you a witch? Have you talked to the devil? All of this kind of thing. In the meantime, the adults are back saying, who else? Who else do you see? And this is the insidious part. These adults are whispering names into that's Ingersoll's Tavern. It's still standing today, which is pretty cool. The adults are whispering names of people they want to get rid of. And it can be for many reasons, but the next person that they cried out against was Sarah Good, who was like the bane of the village's existence. She was a beggar. She would show up all the time begging for food. She was filthy dirty. She drug along her little daughter, Dorcas. And people were just really tired of her. So they yelled out against Sarah Good. And then the third one was Sarah Osborne. And this one is really pretty bad. And it's only when you go back and research the transcripts and what was going on that you get what's happening. The Putnams were very powerful people in Salem town and Salem village. And Sarah Osborne had come into some property when her husband died. The contingency in his will was she had to divide it up among her young sons. Well, she had two of the Putnams as the conservators they're the executors of the will, but she remarried and they weren't counting on that. So she married Alexander Osborne, and she's still young enough to have kids. And she says, you know what? I'm going to revoke my dead husband's will because we could have more kids. And I want them in the will. And the Putnams didn't want it because they lived right next door and they wanted her property.
Wow.
So guess who got hung as a witch?
Right.
And that's what was going on. These adults were whispering names of people they had disputes with over land, that they'd had arguments with. And these girls were just, there she is, she's flying around the room, and these adults were believing them. And in the end, 19 people hung, and Giles Corey was pressed to death under a board with boulders on top. 150 people were accused before it was over. It lasted a little over a year.
It's scary because this is coming from people who are super devout religious.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a really tangled web that they had going on. And a lot of people, when they think of the Salem witch trials, they think, well, it was mass hysteria. It was ergot, I believe, was the fungus found on wheat. They thought that caused it. It was actually insidious goings on in the background of people that the adults wanted to get rid of.
Yeah.
So, do you think there was anything specific about the land itself, the area? Because I know you made mention of ley lines, and I mean, those are power spots. They're nicknamed, Highway of the Dead. There's a belief that even extraterrestrials will use them, to travel, and so they're powerful. So, do you feel that some went under the main village? Do you think that could have contributed to that energy?
What I do know is they are in Salem town.
Right.
There were two different places. Salem Village was Peabody and Danvers mainly. It was farmland. These people were farmers.
Right.
Hours right away, which today is only 10 minutes by car, was Salem town with the harbor with all the rich people. They were importing and exporting, and a lot of them were doing very, very well.
Yeah.
And there was a feud going on between Salem town and Salem Village. Salem town was taxing these farmers for roads that they didn't even use. The roads were over in Salem town, and they were tired of having to pay for things that had nothing to do with them. So there was this inner feud going on. Well, anyway, in Salem town, which is what we all think of today, down the Essex Street runs through the middle of town. That is a ley line through there, and all of the judges' houses were built on that, which I found interesting. But I did not find any evidence of them actually in Salem Village. Doesn't mean it wasn't going on. I believe it was just the suppression of those people. Everything was dark and dismal, and Satan's coming for you. And these are young girls, and we remember that age. You get to a certain age and the hormones are going and all of this stuff is happening. They had no outlet for it. And
Right.
suddenly they're being called superstars. They even put them in a cart and took them into neighboring towns and said, "Do you see any more witches?" And they're pointing at people. Oh, she's one.
Yeah. It was horrific.
Topsfield, I think, had the most named. They, for the first time in their life, they were being noticed and literally worshiped. People wanted to touch them and thank them because they were ridding the village of witches. It was a very heady thing. And once the trial started, the girls were front row and center, and they would go into these theatrics. They'd scream. They would show blood coming out of their arms. Come to find out, they were hiding pins in their clothing. They point to the rafters and go, "There she is. She's on the rafter." Or there's a yellow bird, and a yellow bird was supposed to be a witch's familiar.
They faked seizures as well.
Yeah, there just seems to be a lot of common
Seizures.
sense in there.
Sorry.
They did seizures. They fell down on the ground. The one thing that gives you pause is a lot of times these grown men would go to the homes of these girls. And it is recorded that one or two of them, when they were going, one of them was trying to scoot her chair forward and throw herself into the fire. 3 men were holding the chair down and couldn't hold it still. And I'm going, okay, that's interesting.
That's possession.
And then, yeah, I that would give one pause. It happened with Abigail Williams. There were people that would try to restrict these girls physically, and they couldn't do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you factor in all of the frenzy that all of this created. You have the energy of people. The fear, the anger. It's like that mob mentality. They become so focused, and you just have that riled up energy that just like that alone can create it's like poltergeist activity.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Well,
projected
it's like
energy.
the mother that lifted an entire car off of her child because of that adrenaline. Yeah.
Yes.
I think also what we're not looking at with this is the possibility of some mental health issues back then, because they wouldn't have been recognized. And there are certain mental health issues that create a strength in people and in children. So I wonder if there's one or two. I'm not saying all of them. I think it's a combination of things going on. But mostly the evil was in the people that were pointing them out, not the people themselves, which is so
let's face it,
heartbreaking.
when we have so many people who've migrated over to both Canada and the United States, this side of the world, you bring all of your superstitions with you. You know,
Yes.
that's just where a lot of this old folklore that we have come with people who have brought it with them.
Well,
Because
they also boxed themselves into a corner, because by then they'd hung Bridget Bishop already. And I thought she was the first one to hang. People weren't fond of her either because she ran a tavern in Salem town, and that was thought to be pretty promiscuous for a woman.
it would
A lot of
be,
people
especially
didn't
for
like
to a
her.
Puritan.
Yes. And she was feisty. Used language that a lot of them didn't. I think she
Yeah.
so she was the first to hang. And that, when I was writing the book, was the thing that really stuck out to me. I thought, these girls just witnessed them hang this woman, and they're not going to stop now. This has gotten serious. And it didn't. It escalated. And to me, that was shocking. But then they have entrapped themselves at this point. They can't admit they're faking this now. People are dying. Plus, it could look like they were witches.
Yeah, it becomes murder at this point.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how is it you can see spirits flying around? And, you know, they could have turned on them very quickly. And one of the girls that was trying to leave the fold, that didn't want to do it anymore, they said, go ahead, we'll tell them you're a witch. I mean, it was just, it was one of the
no
most
escaping it.
incredible things.
Yeah.
It's
Tamara makes the
barbaric.
point here. Did you get this one, Amelia?
Yes, Tamara. Hi, Tamara says, I thought the mold was in the wheat, which was in the bread they were eating.
That's the ergo, I think, if I'm saying ERGOT. That has been postulated as something that could have been. Wheat, if it was left too long, would grow a mold. They said it could cause hallucinations. I'm not saying that it didn't.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, when you look at what actually happened, they had adults telling them who to call out against.
Right.
That ergo would have affected all of them.
Exactly.
It wouldn't have been just a small group. That was my reasoning for not believing the wheat mold theory. You know, I understand that it's something they have to bring forward.
Sorry,
Pardon?
Amelia, you're cutting out. You got this like underwater bubbly thing going on.
Okay.
Kind of
Can
like
you
with
hear
your
me?
nickname. It's just like, yeah, Bubbles has got something going on. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I could hear you, but it was like a crackling.
I was
going on.
too close to the mic.
Oh, okay.
These stupid earbuds.
Okay.
But I had to throw that theory out as well, because I couldn't understand how it wouldn't have affected the entire town.
Mm.
Well, that's actually a very good point. There's some things that I find interesting during this period is, you know, we've always associated a broom with witches. Not once in the transcripts did they say a broom. They said the witch flew on a pole. Some of them said a witch picked them up and flew them around on a pole. So the broomstick thing did not come from the Salem witch trials. They never said broom once.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I wonder where they got the broomstick.
Well, the witch thing started with women in New England that would run taverns, and to set themselves apart as somebody selling beer, they would wear a hat with a pointy black hat. So, and they would use that as an emblem on the sign, which meant there was ale and there was drink in there. It's just how it started out. And that, because it was a tavern and it was a woman, it became synonymous with evil, that these women were not your typical Puritans. And so that's where the witches' hat started. They did use a broom to sweep up. I don't know if that was when that came in, but none of it really had to do with the witch stuff that was going on in real life.
It's funny because if you go to the Hawthorne house and you go into the schoolhouse where you're not supposed to take photos, but I did, there is a photograph. You tell me not to, I'm going to fight against it. There's a photograph that's hanging on the wall before you go into the schoolhouse, and it's the students are wearing the witches' hats and the teachers.
That's interesting.
Right when you go in the building in the back where the seamen, and they used to have a little classroom there, and you see the pictures. They're like, you can't photograph anything here. I'm like, yeah, I'm not photographing. But anyways,
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
nope.
Right.
I just found that to be extremely fascinating that they were wearing witches' hats. I
Yeah.
found that to be a bit odd.
Well, when I interviewed, do you need to get a couple of your viewers' questions?
They're just comments. I just put them up as we go along.
Okay. Let me know if you need me to pause.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one. I'm not sure if you've heard about this specific haunting or not. Amelia, can you get that?
Yeah. Am I clear? Because I'm hearing myself.
Yeah, here's all
Okay.
the bubbles. Yeah. Just
Okay, how about
put it
that?
across the room. You'd be all right.
I hate this headset.
Just-
It does
yeah.
it.
Okay.
Okay. Let me move this. How am I now?
Upstairs in the judge's house in a roofed off room. It's very small type for me.
Okay. The crackling stop. It's still going.
Yeah. So
Ooh.
okay, for the audio listeners, when I went upstairs in the judge's house in a roped off room, in the left corner stood a sad looking young boy, about 7. He was dressed in wool knickers, a white shirt, wore a cap. I asked if one of the 2 girls examined there had a brother and was told yes.
Wow,
So,
that's pretty amazing.
yeah, so there we go.
Cool.
Yeah, just an extra story for you. Chris says, witches use brooms to sweep clockwise to create and counterclockwise to destroy, depending on the spell.
Oh,
So,
I
little
should warn
something.
my husband next time I'm sleeping. You don't want to do
Yeah, don't go there. The whole Salem witch trial breaks my heart. It shows the worst of humanity, and this was just the tail end of burning times.
Yeah.
And going back to the pole and the broom, Tamara says, I think it contributes to the mental state of some people at the time and easier to make people believe and manipulate them. So,
Absolutely. The manipulation was huge. But the thing is this Salem village was considered a town of hate. 2 reverends had tried and left. They said they had never seen so much bickering and so many hateful people. It's sad. It was already, it was like the powder keg just needing the spark, and the spark happened to be those 2 little girls crying out.
right. It is up under the impression that the pointed hats symbolize higher wisdom. Brooms are used to sweep out negative energy as well. Yeah. So, yeah, right over there, Amelia.
Actually, I'm hearing crackling from both of you.
Yeah,
Really?
it's not me because I changed my headset. I put on mute. It was still going.
Uh-oh, we have a gremlin or we have poltergeist.
Yeah, that's
It's
totally
something
different.
else. It's not from here.
Okay, take the broom and go counterclockwise. Really?
I'm
I
actually.
would say I produced 2 shows today, and I know I wasn't having an issue. So
I put it on mute. It's not doing it, but I'm going to leave the studio and come back and see if that works. I'll be right back.
Okay. Do you want me to continue on?
yes, please. I say
Well-
let's do it.
So there's one more piece to this puzzle. So you've got Indian raids. You've got the hell and damnation from the pulpit at all times. You have got inbred bickering in the town, boundary disputes, you name it. And then not only that, they had no law. When they came over and broke with England, they had no charter. They had nothing to govern them by. And you've got this mass hysteria going on and all of these people being accused.
Mhm.
And so the 2 judges that sat over those trials were not lawyers. Back then, Harvard, which was right there in Boston, only turned out medical and clergy. They didn't have a law school yet. So these guys knew nothing about law. They were basically using the Bible to determine what to do with this. And the Bible said, thou shalt not suffer a witch. So you've got that. They were just floating around, almost abandoned. They didn't have the legal protection and things they had in England because they walked away from it.
Right. Right. Yeah, that I think it was, yeah, they really didn't have much of a chance any way you look at it. I think that it reminds me a little bit of the Scarlet Letter, just different
Yes.
circumstances, but how the Puritans just were focused on certain things, and that's the way it went. They didn't really need much of a reason. I mean, the only thing that's different in that is you're dealing with infidelity as opposed to, witchcraft.
Right.
Hawthorne wrote Scarlet Letter, and he lived there. The house is still standing.
Exactly. One of the judges was related to him,
Wow.
John Hawthorne, and then Jonathan Corwin was the other judge, and his cousin is George Corwin, who was the sheriff. And this guy, of everyone in the book, I hated him the most. If you were imprisoned, like a lot of these people were, they went to jail when they were called out against until their trial could come up. You were supposed to wait until you were found guilty. If you were found guilty, you forfeited your goods, your home, your cattle, anything. He didn't wait for that. Once they were imprisoned, and like we discussed, both John and Elizabeth Proctor went into jail. They had 9 kids at home, and she was pregnant with another. He rode up to their house with his cart and his buggies and all of this other stuff and just started loading it up while those kids are right there. He took their cows, the pigs. He poured the broth out of the copper kettle that they were having for dinner and took the kettle. He just literally took everything. And Giles Corey, one of the reasons that he was crushed to death is when they would bring you up for the trial, they'd say, are you guilty or not guilty? Well, he knew this trick. If you said not guilty, you were thrown in jail. If you said guilty, they worked with you. But then you were known as a witch, which is the weirdest thing. They didn't hang the people that said they were, I dabbled with witchcraft. I'm really sorry. It won't happen again. Let me help you find the real ones. They didn't hang them. They hung the ones that said not guilty. And Giles knew once they threw him in jail, because his wife was already in jail, Corwin was going to ride out and take all of his possessions. So what he did was he stood there and refused to answer. And they said, guilty or not guilty? He refused to answer. So they finally took him out behind the jail to a field, laid him in kind of a shallow little ditch, put a big giant board like the size of a door over his chest and started putting on these giant boulders. And they come back to him as it's crushing him, going, now what do you say, guilty or not guilty? And he just said, more weight. He was really, really stubborn. He lasted 3 days. They gave him a piece of bread and a little bit of water each day. He got rained on. He laid out there in the blistering heat for 3 days until he finally died.
That man was a Navy SEAL before Navy SEALs were created.
Yes. But the jail conditions were so horrible. These are just stone buildings. They're close to the ocean. If things flooded, it flooded into the jail, and you're sitting there in water. They were literally given hay to do their business in, and it stayed in the room with them. So here, the women were separated from the men that were called out against. So they're defecating in the straw, and the straw stays in there. And the smells were horrendous. The food was horrible. And then you were charged for your blanket, for the hay. Later on, when the girls were getting a little bored, needed to up the game, if it looked like they were about to let one of the women go that they cried out against, they would say, her spirit flew in my window last night. So they went to the jail and shackled those women, thinking if they're shackled to the floor, their spirit can't get out. I mean, the conditions were horrible. One little baby was born in there that died. And so it was freezing in the winter and unbearable in the summer. And it was horrible.
Yeah, I agree with Margaret when she says it sounds medieval.
Very much so.
You know, like, I mean, we're at medieval times. It's just so, like, you would think. I mean, I know it's about land, it's about money. It's you know, it's an old story. Unfortunately, a lot of people believe that that's actually what happened to Countess Elizabeth Bathory as well. That it was about land and money, and it just seems like the same old. Because you're dealing with, you know, educated people here to a degree. I mean, you know,
Yes.
they're obviously very cunning, but then it makes you wonder, well, okay, you know, people get into this frenzy listening to kids, and you're just getting into this point. Like, doesn't anybody at any point, what was the breaking point that finally made them say, okay, you know what, this is out of hand. You know, they're going to turn on us pretty soon.
They kept, this went on for a year, and 150 people were named. Finally, they cried out against the governor's wife. Then he went, okay, we're done here.
Ah,
I'm
That's
serious.
that's when it stopped.
It ended.
Yeah.
They cried out against Governor Phipp's wife, and he went, we're done.
wow.
Tituba was the first to go into jail and the last to leave because no one would pay her fines that she had for being in jail for a year. Some guy finally came along and paid him off and took her as his servant. So she was the first in and the first out. They finally, the last ones were released in, I believe, February of the next year, 1990.
It was a
1993.
long haul and so sad. You had the judges and the people were law, they were government, they were persecutors, they were everything, jailers, they were everything, and all the decisions weighed upon this small tiny group, which was so unfair.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, there were the haves and the have-nots, and they, you know, that was another form of contention that they cried out against several very wealthy people. And, but mainly it was just, a lot of it was land disputes, some relatives, it was relatives against relatives, which was really sad. So yeah, it was such a black period for us. And yet a lot of people have asked me, do you think it could happen again today? And I think under the right circumstances, it could, sadly.
History has a way of repeating itself.
Yeah.
It's just a vicious cycle. I think, you know, if you think long and hard about how easy it is to create division, I think we've seen that over the last 3 years in a different form. Division has been created, and, you know, a lot of frenzy was created, and a lot of this is what it is. This is what it is, and people, you know, can't prove it, but this is what it is. We're just gonna, you know, follow certain criteria, and, you know, without just putting out, I feel like flagging us on YouTube, but, you know, I think it can happen very easily. I think the theory on that would be correct. It's been happening for thousands of years. Why would it just stop? Because we're wiser, and we have technology, and we're supposed to be smarter. We've seen it happen so many times. We're still trying to erase history just to show it didn't happen. You can erase all the history you want. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it won't repeat itself again.
Absolutely.
And if you erase it, how are you going to learn from it?
How do you remember? I agree with you, Rebecca. How do you remember the pain? I feel like, for me, if it's in your face, it hits you and you remember how barbaric something was and that we can't be that way and we need to do better. But if it's not there and we're not reading about it, like Michelle says, it does repeat itself. I mean, we're going backwards in so many things nowadays anyways, there's so much going on.
Well, Arthur Miller actually wrote The Crucible. He used the witch trials as his analogy, but it was about the Hollywood 10 in Los Angeles, which was back in the 40s, where any of the producers, actresses, anybody in that entertainment industry that they believed were communist, it was called a witch hunt.
Lucille Ball was one of those.
Losing their jobs and losing everything. And so he used the witch trials to get his point across, but he was actually writing about that period in time, the McCarthyism. And so, I mean, look what just happened to us. We were shut down for 2 years.
Yes.
Look at all of the businesses that went through by the wayside, and people without jobs. That feeling of lack of control and fear.
Mm-hmm.
So if something else had come along at that time, when people, for the first time in our lives in America, have witnessed something like that, I think it could have exploded.
I think it could still explode. I think that once you have people in power, much like the whole all the people in Salem, you have people with power, and once those people have that power, they don't relinquish it that easily. They're
Right.
going to pull it through as long as they possibly can. And, of course, it will continue to repeat itself. You give one person, okay, well, we're just going to vote this person out. Don't kid yourself. Once somebody has hold of that power, many people that would say, oh, no, I won't do that. They don't relinquish it that easily.
Exactly.
Right?
It is. It's hard. It's a momentum. It's like a snowball going down a hill, and at some point you can't stop it. And I think that's what happened with the Salem witch trials. It got completely out of hand, and those girls didn't know how to stop it. And so finally, at the end, Ann Putnam Jr., who was one of the most prolific crier outers, she, I think, accused 12 people that I don't know if all 12 were hung, but she was having a good time with it. She finally admitted, we were bored and we did it out of sport. And now these people are all dead. And she apologized. There was one other girl, but she was primarily the one that came forward and stood in front of the church congregation with Rebecca Nurse's relatives sitting there. Rebecca was 70 when she was hung. I mean, she's got these people's relatives of these people that have been hung because of her. It took a lot of courage for her to do that.
It did, but was there any repercussion for that?
No, except unless you look at it from a different viewpoint. A lot of people have said, what happened to the girls? Most of them went on to have very tragic lives. Only one or two married happily. A couple of them went into prostitution, I understand. Some died young. They did not do well.
Yeah, can't say I'm sorry.
It falls under karma.
It wasn't just, at the trials that they would do these things. Ingersoll's Tavern that you put up that's where everybody would go between breaks for the witch trials. They would go during lunchtime, on the Sabbath, when you finally got a break and could get out of the pew for a minute. So Ingersoll's raking in the bucks because when the trials took off, he couldn't hold them there anymore. There wasn't enough room. So they had to go down the hill a short distance to the meeting house. And if you go there today, there is a plaque showing where the meeting house was, and it is just steps from Ingersoll's Tavern. But all of these people were running over there for food and drink in between breaks in the witch trials. So one of the girls came in and started screaming and falling down in front of everybody and showing them bite marks that I'm assuming she did to herself, or had one of the other girls do it to her so that it didn't look like she could do it herself. So they took their show on the road. It wasn't just during the trials. People were just following them around and witnessing these strange things they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that all along the way, like I mentioned with the Putnams wanting the land, and suddenly Sarah Osborne's hung when she wants to undo the will, that fight for the property was still going on when she died. So when you start looking at it pragmatically, take away the part, there's a lot going on of people coveting someone else's property.
Yes.
And it's just, you can see it happening. It's like a thread running through it.
Oh, it still happens. It's always happened. That's just, get rid of your enemy, get rid of the obstacle.
Oh, yeah.
Everything becomes fair game.
No one
But
could speak up then because they would
yeah.
have been accused. They were all afraid. So these girls willed a lot of power.
Hmm.
Definitely. Hi,
What,
Let's,
okay,
Chris.
what is
we're going
he
to lighten
thinking?
up here. Okay. I'm going to get that,
Chris wants
Amelia.
us to lighten up a bit. He says, Rebecca, what do you think of Lori Cabot, the official witch of Salem? Is she still alive? And then he writes, oh, damn, I'm old. LOL.
We're with you, Chris. Promise.
Chris, I honestly don't know that one. I'm very sorry. I don't. I've heard the name,
Yeah.
but and
Oh.
I'm old too, so that's fine. I honestly, I don't know. I will tell you this. When I interviewed the curator at the Salem Witch Museum, which they get a ton of people, they're that big Gothic church-looking thing across from the Hawthorne Hotel.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is. When we stayed on the 6th floor in the Hawthorne, and you could look out the window across the street at it. And at night, they've got the red lights on it, and it's very spooky. But I interviewed her, and they are very keen to point out that the witches in Salem today are Wicca, which is a totally different thing. These are people who live off the land. They're very much into nature and herbs and healing.
Right.
You're not the typical, and there's a lot of them there. There's some Wicca shops that I went into one and did not feel welcome. She looked like, oh, here comes another tourist. This stuff is serious.
Mhm.
You know, and I walked around and realized, okay, I'm not going to get a magnet for the refrigerator in here.
No.
But you could get that at Borden's house.
Right.
So they take it very, very seriously. And part one of the tour at the Salem Witch Museum is all about the witch trials. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's wonderful. It's a theater in the round kind of thing, huge room. And then when you leave, they take you through an exhibit of witches over the centuries and describe what Wicca is today.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, very nice.
I think for a lot of children, our first thought of a witch was from the Wizard of Oz, and we assumed they had green faces and pointy hats, and
Yeah, ghoul-like.
Right. We just have to do a quick station and sponsor ID, please.
Yes, definitely. We'll catch Chris's comment right after this. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM. We are on Roku right now and archived. So we'll say hello, Roku. Welcome, everybody from Roku. Please share us with your friends and family. Our special guest tonight is Rebecca Pittman, and we're discussing the Salem witch trials. If you are just tuning in, no worries, because you can stream our archives on any platforms that you normally use. Don't forget to share us with your friends and family again. Huge thank you to the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for sponsoring our show. And also another shout out and thank you for our incredible intro and outro to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon. Justin Snicker, award-winning composer and musician. He's also the voice of our intro and outro. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, and check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Now, if you're listening to us on Facebook or YouTube, make sure to give us a like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Nice cover.
We are back. Yeah, nice.
Yes, we
cover.
are back.
I just zeroed right in like a little
Yes.
squirrel.
Oh, I love book covers. Yeah.
I get teased. I create all my own covers, and I create them just using PowerPoint.
Yeah, I've done a couple. That is beautiful.
Thank you. I think my Versailles cover is my favorite, but I don't know how to use Photoshop, and I'm pretty happy just using PowerPoint. So
yeah,
beautiful.
Versailles is spectacular, isn't it? Oh.
So this is the book, people. Go out and find it, and it can be found on Amazon.
Beautiful.
Or do they get it at your website?
Thank you, guys. I actually got the Salem backdrop just for your show tonight behind me.
Oh, very nice. I love it. We're honored. I love it.
Nice.
So Sam recognized that building right there.
Yeah.
It's just right in your book.
I love those type homes, but I've hung it up, and my husband came around the corner and he goes, "Okay, let me guess." Another show. But
That's right.
I'll share with you something, and if I don't know if you're putting up the photos or if your tech guy is, but I sent you two on swimming the witch.
Yeah, I was just looking at them actually. So let me go and grab them.
Because this is another one of those, are you kidding me, things that they did where it was a no-win situation.
Right.
If they thought you were a witch, they would either tie you to a chair or just put a rope around you and toss you into a lake or dip you into the lake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just looking for them
If
right now.
you, because water is supposed to reject anything that isn't pure. If you floated because the water wouldn't accept you, you were a witch. If you stayed under the water, you weren't a witch, but a lot of them drowned. So it was like you couldn't win. If you weren't a witch, a lot of them ended up, they left them under there too long to make sure they didn't bob to the top like a witch would, and they drowned.
And
they
I'm
missed
still
it.
looking. I had them all. My computer did an update today. I'm like, thank you for that. So,
Oh my gosh.
I know. I
It's
will get there. I
it's
was
tech
just
crazy
looking at
today.
them too. So
Yeah.
it's like, come on.
Well,
I'm
one of
so-
the other photos is they called it looking for the witch's teat. We call it a tit, but basically this was so humiliating. They would take these women into Ingersoll's Tavern, into a back room there, and several of the village women would take the woman's clothes off and search everywhere, and I do mean everywhere, for like another nipple, because witches were supposed to suckle their familiars, like, a wolf or a snake or a bat or yellow birds. And they'd see an unusual mole or something a lot of times and say, we found something. When it was, I mean, I would, if somebody searched me, I'd be in big trouble, because my whole family has a connect the dot things with freckles and stuff.
Me too.
But that's what they would do. And I mean, can you imagine how embarrassing? You're in this Puritan environment where the clothing covers all of you, and there's no buttons or zippers or,
Yeah.
and then you're stripped down in front of these people who are probing everything to look. It
No,
was
it's disgusting.
horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, found one. So going. Thank you very much to the big update. Just throwing a wrench in my life tonight. Here we go. There we are. All right. This is bothersome when I see
Yeah.
that's really
Swimming the
bothersome.
witch.
Yeah, that's
But if they left them under too long, a lot of the innocent people drowned. It was so barbaric.
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I mean, I see things like this and it's like, okay, well, figure out, if you're a witch, you won't drown. It's like
Yeah.
it's just simple. I'm just looking for the other one.
Yeah. They weren't the only church that did that, though. The Catholic Church did that as well.
Mm.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. They would throw them over the side of a bridge with rocks tied to them.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, of course you're going to drown.
Well, one of the other things they would do during the trial is they would have the witch recite the Lord's Prayer, because supposedly a witch could not do that and recite it perfectly.
Well, the memorial, I was explaining to Michelle that the threshold has the last words of everyone that was hung, and all of them had, I am not guilty, God, do not forsake me. It was really devastating to see that.
Yeah, that's another illustration of swimming the witch.
Yeah,
And
that's
the
just
thing that is even worse is that back then they believed the children should see it all. They believed that was a warning to them. See what happens to you if you don't mind, if you become Satan's children. There's little kids watching the hangings. And I don't know, the whole system just seemed very barbaric to me.
that was entertainment,
Yeah.
to go to a hanging. And it's so not what people would think. And this is something that's really sad when you think about it, because a hanging, you just assume like, there was actually science behind it. You just didn't hang somebody and then it just worked. They would weigh you, because if the rope was too long or it wasn't long enough, and you got hung, your whole head could separate from your body. And then it would just kind of go all over the place. Like, this is a fact. So they would have to, there was a science to it for the most part, just to make sure that that didn't happen. And sometimes if you didn't get it right, you would hang there and not die.
Yeah. Even executioners had a certain
Yeah, it
skill.
was like,
They wanted to take that. If they were kind, they would take the head off in one swipe. So you
Right.
would have to be really skilled at what you did so that you weren't hurt. But if they wanted to be nasty, they could take a couple of them.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, King Henry VIII's first wife, what was her name? Catherine?
Mhm.
She did not go on one swipe.
Oh, that was Anne Boleyn. No, Anne
Anne Boleyn
Boleyn. He
was-
finally gave. He had a French swordsman come in to do it cleanly instead.
Make
of
sure it was clean.
But
Yeah.
but he executed another wife where it didn't go clean.
Catherine
have
of
to
Aragon,
look-
I believe it
I don't-
was.
I don't
Catherine
remember.
Aragon was she died. That was the first wife. It was Catherine. But you're right. Isn't she the young one that ran screaming for her life? That it's now the haunted gallery at Hampton Court?
That's Anne Boleyn.
No,
Actually, that's not.
No.
Anne Boleyn, I believe, is the one looking for her head. And they actually they had paranormal people come in to settle her down. There's so many reports of her with whole processions in the church that have been seen
wow.
by guards overnight, and they would look in and see like her and this entire procession of people, the whole place lit up. What kind of energy does something like that?
Well, how come they don't mention her brother? I mean, he was executed as well. The father just walked away.
Yeah, and the uncle. I mean, I'm going.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you people?
Well, they're the ones that bargained her, used her as as currency to get into court.
Yeah, and the money with positions were more important than her, which is, it's just, well, when I was writing about Versailles, Marie Antoinette has a very famous haunting there at the Petit Trianon, which was her private little chateau palace in the gardens of Versailles.
With all her lovers.
But, yeah, okay. So, anyway, in 1901, I believe it was 1909, somewhere in there, two academics from Oxford. They were actually the dean and the other one was about to become the dean. Were vacationing in Paris, and they wanted to see Marie Antoinette's Petit Trianon. So when you come out of the Palace of Versailles, you go across and into the gardens, and it's back in there a little ways. So they're walking, and all of a sudden they hear the pounding of feet coming. And when they turn around, there's nobody there. And when they look back, this guy's right in front of them that came out of nowhere. He's in the period clothing of the time of Marie Antoinette. And he's yelling at him in French. And he was saying, don't go that way. Don't go that way. Go back to the palace. And then he bows and takes off and he disappears, but they can still hear his running for a while. So they're trying to figure this out when all of a sudden they notice all this stuff. They said that the landscapes seemed to go flat, like stage props.
Oh,
The
wow.
trees were flat. They said there was this atmosphere of depression. They both got depressed. They kept going and came across 3 guards in the period style of when Marie Antoinette was there. And they said, which way to the Petit Trianon? And they said, through the gate. So they actually interacted with them. They saw a lady with a milk jug. They saw another one beating a rug out a window. And then when they got to the Petit Trianon, they saw a woman sitting in front sketching with the hair just like hers, the fichu, or however you call it, the little shawl. And she's sketching and she looks over at them like this as they go by. And later when they compared notes, because neither one of them wanted the other one to know they were seeing these things, because they thought they wanted to think they were crazy.
Right.
They realized they had seen some of the same things, but not all of them. And so the older woman saw Marie Antoinette, but the younger woman didn't, who was right next to her. And she goes, how did you not see her? She was right there. She looked at us.
Right.
And she said she only remembered a sensation of needing to pull her long dress out of the way, like someone was there and that she was in the way. Some chaplain came running out of a door at the Petit Trianon that later, when they went back, it was covered with cobwebs, hadn't been opened for years. And this was all documented. And they didn't know what to do with it because they're a dean of the the Oxford's Girls College. They thought, we're going to lose our jobs. I mean, this is the early 1900s. And finally, they got up the courage to publish what they found. They each wrote down their own account. One would see an old plow, the other one didn't. One heard voices, the other one didn't. And they got fired. And one of them, the youngest one, there's mystery around her death. I think she may have hung herself.
Oh my goodness.
But here's the very cool part. The older woman who saw Marie Antoinette sketched her from memory, from what she saw. And when she presented it to the board of directors, trying to convince them, I did see these things. They're looking at it, and she had drawn her with an aquiline nose that had a little hump, and that she had kind of an underbite where she was German. It was the Habsburg chin. Yeah. Well, all of the famous portraits of Marie Antoinette didn't show her with those imperfections. They were like we would Photoshop today. The nose was fine. So they found an old picture of her a couple of years later, and there she was, the way she really is, with the bump in the nose. And in fact, the only thing that really looks like her is a bust of her that's inside the Petit Trianon, and the profile has the little hump.
Well, she probably had a lot of control on her portraits, the same way that King Henry VIII did. He always had his portraits painted thinner than he was, like a third his size, and much more, like handsome, which he really wasn't.
I heard Winston Churchill did that too. Could you
I believe
take
it.
a few years off of that for him?
I believe it. He had quite the ego, right? But what a brilliant mind.
But that is a documented account, and for anyone that's interested, it's in my book, but The History and Haunting of the Palace of Versailles. But they wrote their own book that was finally printed. It's called An Adventure, and you can get it on Amazon. It's very old. It's very cool.
I would love to walk through the Versailles, and I would stay there.
Yeah,
I'd stay at the Versailles.
The best they could. They built a hotel on the grounds, but you can't really stay in the.
No, but I'd be fine with that. You want to be close so that you can experience it every minute that you have available. That's a large palace.
It's a lot of walking.
Yes, that's okay. You get your steps in.
But what's interesting is 2 other groups of people over the years have come forward and said they had a similar encounter in the gardens there. So that's pretty cool.
She spent a lot of time there. Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. Yeah, she didn't really say that, interestingly.
No.
Oh my gosh, she got the really raw end of the deal.
She did. Kind of like Joan of Arc. They kind of both, very tragic.
Yeah, I think we traumatized poor Chris.
Yeah, he said he's out. He's out. He left. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, most traumatizing episodes this show I've been involved in. Sorry. Hey, the show is about awareness, and this is it's one of those topics that people are curious about it. But I love that you come out with literally the bare bones of everything. This is how it was. This is how the research showed it being, and you put it out there. It's so commercialized, and I think film is also commercialized, not just these accounts, but many. And I like that you just come out and say, what you see is what you get.
Well, I did 5 years of research just for Lizzie Borden. Wow. I can't turn out a book that I know I haven't put 100% into. I just can't. Agreed. It's not ego. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to, and I'll admit when I'm wrong. Yes. But with Lizzie Borden, I found 5 new pieces of evidence that have stood the test of time. They are backed up by testimony. I even found a man that the police were looking for, and that was 128 years ago, and I found him.
Good for
Wow.
you.
So, and he ended up playing a very big part because he was Lizzie's cousin. And if they had found him, they would have realized what her motive was for murder, but they never found him.
Wow.
I love
Wow.
the research. It's my favorite part. The
Yes.
ghosts are a bonus.
They are a bonus. I walked through Lizzie Borden's house as a medium. I was really surprised that he was okay with that. We were doing the tour, and he, at one point, he said to me, Amelia, I need you to stop because it's off my script, kind of thing.
Who said that?
The person, I don't want to mention his name, but the person that was
not
doing
Andrew. You're talking about a real person. Okay.
a person who mentioned the name, who was doing the tour, asked me to stop because the tour were following me, and I was right about these certain things, but
Wow.
I was just really, really, I believe that any medium that goes in there is going to feel that sadness and that heaviness that weight when they go into the house.
Absolutely.
It's so thick.
There's
so thick.
a lot of atmosphere there. I slept in Lizzie's bedroom to get a feel for it so I could write about it. And I knew that her parents were right on the other side of the wall, their bedroom.
Yes.
And I thought, how do you lay here knowing you can hear them talking, murmuring that you are going to take a hatchet to these people in the morning? And it was hard for me to sleep, just trying to visualize what she was thinking laying there.
She's another one. Didn't she spend a year in prison?
10 months in jail.
10 months, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
She
But-
spent that
For
time
the-
waiting trial.
For
Yeah.
bludgeoning 2 people.
Well, bludgeoning, it was at 18 blows with a hatchet to Abby and 11 to Andrew. But yeah,
That's a mega bludgeon.
we'll have to
Well,
do that one
there's
again.
a lot that happened to her.
Well, if you'll have me back sometime, we'll do Lizzie, because it is fascinating. And there were actually 3 murder plots, 3 hatchets, and 3 different dresses involved.
I would love to do a show on Lizzie Borden, and I would love to do one on the Limp Mansion, which is just so many. That's another real big one that people seem to be curious about. One of my favorites.
Well,
So-
and the Myrtles Plantation is named the most haunted home in America. And I watched
Yes.
my earrings move down the mantle there, and something pulled my blanket off. And
That one's high. Is that the one that has the scrying room? Is it Myrtles that has that room that looks like a closet? You go in there and it's a black mirror and it's for scrying?
no.
Maybe it's a different plantation. I have to look that one up. That one freaked me right out when I saw it on TV, but it was years ago and I have a terrible memory. They
That's-
literally had a
I mean-
closet you went into and the whole black mirror and everything, and you close the door with a
Ooh.
candle and you sit there and scry. I'm like, why?
You could come and scry with my black mirror.
I hate that black mirror. Is it up
I know.
already? Did you hang it yet?
I didn't hang it yet.
Okay, good.
I just moved. I haven't had time
I
to
hope
unpack
she
yet.
forgets. I hope she forgets until after I've been there.
You guys
Maybe
are so
not.
much fun.
Her mirror is scary.
Her mirror's
It's not.
scary.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful
It's
mirror.
beautiful. I never said it was ugly.
Weighs a
It's
ton
just so
because it's old and it's a black mirror. They're hard to
it's
find.
so scary.
I don't scry on it for
No, I know,
God's sake,
but
so I
it's just
hang it.
black mirrors freak
You're the
me out.
only one
And
I
this
know
one's
gets wigged out by it.
well, there's probably a reason for it. I just never stood in front of it long enough to know.
That would freak me out a little bit.
It's all enveloping for me. Black mirrors, like it just draws me in, and I don't like the feeling. So, yeah.
Well, the Myrtles has a gigantic haunted mirror that they cannot get the handprints off of.
I've heard
They've
about that.
resilvered
That's the
it.
story.
They've done everything they know how, and the handprints come back up.
Yeah.
Right. See, that's
That's a-
interesting, especially if they come up from the other side.
That's a sad historical
Yeah.
place.
There's so much to talk about. We could just
Yeah, a
go and
lot
go,
happened
and we
there.
will. We will. I
Yay.
will email you after the show. We'll book you again.
Well,
And
thank you.
maybe again. And we'll just keep going through it. Like we book a
We
few months.
definitely
So
have to have Rebecca in October, Michelle.
yeah, we'll do
Oh,
we'll
that
we'll,
would
we'll,
be fun.
we'll keep the creepiest one for October.
Well, I'll tell you something. Do I have a minute real quick?
Yes, of course you do.
Okay. So I got into true crime a couple of years ago because of the Pam Hupp story in St. Louis, that she, a serial killer. In fact, her death penalty trial is coming up next year. And I'll have to write a sequel. So I found that segueing into true crime wasn't that hard from paranormal. It's the same thing. It's the mystery. It's the clues.
Yeah.
So I'm right now finishing up Countdown to Murder Alec Murdaugh, which is the big case going on in South Carolina. And he was just found guilty of killing his wife and son. So when people ask me, aren't you afraid of the ghosts? Well, after writing about Pam Hupp and Alec Murdaugh, I go, believe me, I'm more afraid of the living.
Yes.
See, we're kindred
Yes.
spirits, Rebecca
Yes,
and
it's
I. I
true.
went from crime to paranormal, and I said to Michelle, it's a lot easier in this realm than it is with the serial killers.
realm
When
of
you
the
see that
living,
kind
absolutely.
of stuff, yeah, the living scare me
Absolutely.
more than the dead.
Yeah,
Yes.
they do. And I after writing about these two people, it's just, there's no soul. I don't know how else to put it. There is absolutely nothing in there. There's no consciousness of guilt consciousness.
Well,
There's just nothing.
have you thought about this? Because Amelia and I have talked about this, and I've seen it. I've been in this field a long time. But people are born like that. Somewhere along the line, something happens to them. Do they have an attachment? That something will level attached to them? Because, if you're paranormally speaking about another, maybe like a malevolent spirit, a malevolent entity, interdimensional entity, anything can attach to us. We're pretty fragile as human beings. As strong as we can be with our essence, we're still pretty fragile in a way. So does something come in? Like it's like the egg and the chicken. Which comes first? Do you commit a deed and then something attaches, or does something attach and drive you to this point in your life where you do these atrocious things? Because we've seen spirits that have had attachments, serial killers.
A lot of it, I think, is an aberration. Whether it's the wiring in the brain or something, they're missing.
Yeah.
Usually it's the frontal lobe. It's usually the frontal lobe that's affected. It's not, it hasn't been formed by the time they're 21. It's either that, or like you said, nothing's connecting. There's a lot of reasons.
That's your logical side of it.
That's the logical side, and they have no logic. But there's a big difference. That's a whole other show between sociopath and psychopath, and then an attachment to either one of these, which sometimes you can argue that scientifically, because of these formations in their brain, perhaps they're able to communicate with other realms and bringing this in, and that's how this attachment comes out. It's a whole, like there's just so many discussions in every case, every killer. None of them are the same.
Well, that's true. And in the book on Alec Murdaugh, this is really cool, real quick. I've never used remote viewing. You're familiar with Michelle. She's the one that got me on your show.
Yes.
She actually has a group of remote viewers, and she goes, would you like to give them a try? And I said, okay, because I do believe in it. And I went to a lecture once. And she said, I just need you to write down 2 questions. Don't tell me anything about it. I don't want to know the gender or what it's about or location or anything. So long story short, I asked, okay, could you please show me the location of this thing I'm thinking of and anything you see around it? Well, she had 3 different remote viewers send me their stuff, and it was a combination of scribbled words that came to them and drawings. The drawings blew my mind.
Right.
But the one that I just went, holy cow, was one of them said, I see headlines, 2 lines, the word cracking. And when I saw that, I went, what? And they actually wrote those reports the end of February. I shot off the couch because about 2 days before, and on April 1st of this year, keep in mind, they wrote the reports in the end of February. April 1st, a headline came out about the case I'm working on that said, SLED cracks the phone. It was 2 lines, and then the second part was the rape kit is still missing. The hairs are on my arms again. There's no way that's a coincidence. They wrote that almost 3 months before that headline actually came out. And they even put cracking in quotes.
Yeah. Remote
Isn't
viewers can
that
go
insane?
well, remote viewers can go past and present and future. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Amelia,
Well, I
remote views.
believe-
So, yeah.
I didn't even know I was remote viewing. It took
It
years
was your
before I
natural
realized.
remote viewer.
I
I've
just-
worked with many remote viewers in my 20 years of working, and you're well, I'll say definitely you're one of the best remote viewers I've worked with.
Thank you. She's
Oh,
just saying
wow.
that because she loves me.
No, I'm saying it because,
Well, I love you too.
Well, I love you, Rebecca.
There we go.
I would,
Yeah.
we, Michelle and I would assist you in anything.
Thank
Yeah.
you, because this has still got a couple of unsolved murders associated with it. And
I
also
haven't looked
some
at
of the-
Murdoch yet. I've worked a lot of high profile murder cases, but I've always remained anonymous. But I haven't looked at the Murdoch case yet because I've had a lot going on in my family. My daughter just had a kidney transplant in January, and my husband, her dad gave her the kidney. So it's been crazy here.
Wow.
So I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I can tell you just the first time I saw his face, I was like, this guy better pay. It was just like, you just know.
There's 5 murders around this family.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are unsolved. In fact, they just exhumed one young man, and they're going into it trying to find out what happened. I mean,
I can
I'm
tell you,
trying to write a book, and every day it's breaking news, and I'm going, no.
because you have to wait for the trial to finish. But even then, you'll be able to write a second volume, which I see. The whole thing with Murdoch is he more than likely has committed multiple murders over the years. But
they
that'll
believe the body count around him.
well, John Wayne
Not just
Gacy,
him,
they're
but
still
his
pulling out bodies.
grandfathers.
They're still pulling out bodies for John Wayne Gacy.
No, Gad.
So, this happens because they only admit to so many, because it becomes, with someone like him, it's a mental game. It's ego. It's narcissism. He's smarter than you. I will tell you how many people I killed. That's who he is. So that's his type, his profile. So it's going to be a difficult one. He will only give that information if he feels that you're worthy of it. It's
Ted
a
Bundy's
huge game.
throwing them along, trying to buy time too.
Yeah, it's a game. It's a mind game. So they have to be really, really quick and on their feet, because as much as I love law enforcement, and most of my friends that I've developed friendships with are like family over the years, they still don't know everything about the psychology. It takes a team to crack someone like him.
Yeah, he's getting love letters in prison. I have never understood.
Well, Manson got married, didn't he? Bundy was a charmer. They don't look like the people you think they look like. There's no stranger danger with this. They're usually charismatic. They portray that love bomb in the narcissistic way that they are accustomed to. They're high IQs. They can't do what they do if they weren't. They couldn't deceive that long.
That they're smarter and that they're never going to get caught.
Absolutely.
That's the part I love, is the one thing they did that they messed them up.
Watch him with a perspective of a high psychotic narcissist.
Oh,
and you'll be able to break it down even more.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no problem. Anytime.
With that, we have to sign off.
After we freaked everybody out.
Hour of just crime. Maybe we will.
Well, if you guys get a chance, go spend the night at the Proctor House. It's pretty amazing.
We'll have to meet you there.
Okay.
We'll do it together.
It'll be fun. Go to theproctorhouse.com.
Yeah.
But
all right, guys, you heard it.
Well,
thank you
so much for joining us tonight. It was definitely educational to say the least.
We
And
traumatized Chris, though.
He'll be
of
okay.
course,
He's
Chris,
back
he'll be
every
all
week.
right. Yes, he'll be okay.
We love
Yeah,
Chris.
he's a regular. He'll be back. But people loved it.
See?
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you. So
We have a great
we
audience.
do. We're very fortunate. We're very fortunate.
Well, you put on a great show. You guys have great chemistry
Thank
together.
you.
Thank you. Well, you know what? You guys make it that much more special. The chat room, everybody's very encouraging. So, we're very fortunate and we have a great listenership. So, and of course, we're nominated for, People's Choice Podcast Awards year 3. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know. It's always nice to be nominated. I think we made it to the finals year 1.
We laugh because we're best friends in real life, so it just feels like we're just having a conversation. So it just feels surreal to us when we see that.
Those are the best shows.
Yeah.
Mullins, I said hi and save me an alligator bite.
Yeah. Well, you will definitely be coming back, and I will message you, and we will look at some upcoming dates, and we will pick what we want to talk about next,
All right.
or what you want to talk
ladies.
about
Thank
next.
you
we just
so
go with the
much.
flow. So, yeah. But I think
Talk to
Lent
you
would
soon.
definitely be closer to spooky month. That's
Thank
definitely
you.
it is.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Have a great weekend.
Right.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Good night. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic segment. Everybody, thank you all for chiming in. Big thank you to Rebecca Pittman. It was dark, but you know what? It was definitely on point. And sometimes we just have to, it's hard to hear. But again, we do a lot of shows that are pretty much awareness. And this was one of them. And a lot of people are curious about the witch trials. And I think we definitely got more than we bargained for. And we thank you for that, Rebecca. It was amazing. So also big thank you to Folgers Coffee, to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, Steve McGinnis. Thank you. Thank you. Here's the part where everybody's waiting for. Next week, Brian Baker, the owner and writer for the Superstitious Times, is going to be discussing one of his current articles. I actually participated in this article along with Ellie Van Dusen, I believe. So, you guys saw him last night. And we spoke a lot about locations that have stigma attached to it from being haunted. And is it a good idea? To advertise them as haunted, for people to come in and investigate them. I took it from 2 different standpoints. One from having a haunted, B&B that people come to and what it did to the spirits of the house, and then working and representing locations that did not want that stigma. So it was a really, really great article. So if you guys look at the Superstitious Times, you can go just check it out and read it. But he's going to come on and we're going to discuss it in great detail among, other things. But it was a really great article. And I thought it warranted having a little bit more international, attention and discussion. Also Thursday night, okay, what you all know and love is the Q&A panel discussion. We do have a specific topic in mind, but of course, we're just not going to come out with it right now. We always start with something and then, we all chime in together and end up like in 10 different places. So we love that about the Q&A. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have another one on Thursday. So thank you guys all for tuning in. I hope you have a terrific weekend, and we'll see you next week. Be safe.